Hello and welcome to a complete guide to Elite Dungeon 2, also known as the Dragonkin Laboratory. This guide will go through the Elite Dungeon step by step so that you can do this Elite Dungeon effectively. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you enjoy all kinds of Runescape content, be sure to subscribe. Let's move on to the guide. While Elite Dungeon 2 is by far the easiest out of all dungeons currently in the game, it is worth pointing out that if you are doing this for the first time and you're not that experienced with PvM, the stats on screen may not be sufficient. They will be sufficient enough if you're doing this in a group of 3 players where perhaps one player is more experienced at this boss already. If not, you definitely want to have 90 plus combat stats and curses unlocked to do this solo properly. In terms of recommendations for Elite Dungeons 2, I definitely recommend completing the Curse of the Blackstone quest as it reduces all damage taken in the dungeon by 10%. Having an active Dragon Slayer task is very useful, as if you have a Slayer helmet equipped or you have the Anachronia Slayer helmet stand, you'll get that extra damage and accuracy when killing dragons inside the dungeon. Now, showing a bunch of gear setups and talking about it for 10 minutes is a little bit old-fashioned, so I'll be going through these gear setups quite quickly. As a general rule of thumb, use the best gear you have available to you, preferably either ranged or magic gear, because melee is a little bit more tricky to use in this dungeon, especially at the last boss. But it's absolutely possible and very powerful to use here either way. I'm just saying, if you want to do this for the first time and you have ranged or magic gear, use that instead, as it's going to be far easier. Now, I'm aware that the gear setups I'm showing you are very high level and have gear that is worth billions of GP. I do, however, have some budget examples as well to show you, which aren't so cluttered with switches that may be confusing to you. Before I go to the budget gear setup, I do want to mention a new item that was added recently in the game, known as the Jazz Dragonbane Arrow. These arrows give you 30% more damage and 20% extra hit chance when fighting against dragons in every single attack, although they consume an arrow every single attack as well, so they're very, very expensive, but this may be fixed in the future when you're watching this video. In that case, if you're going here, always use these arrows and a bow because it's just so incredibly powerful. You still absolutely want to be bringing an offhand ranged weapon with mechanized chin chompers and some ammo though, because chinning down certain mobs, AoE damage is still important here, especially when killing the trash mobs. Now, here are 2 budget gear examples. One is using magic tank armor, which you only want to be using if you have the anime dead spell unlocked from the City of St. Distant quest. Otherwise, use subjugation DPS armor. As for the range setup, I'm using a royal crossbow and ruby back bolts, as those tier 95 arrows I mentioned earlier are way too expensive to recommend for a budget setup. Keep in mind that if you're using a ranged weapon, you want to bring along mechanized chin chompers and an offhand crossbow as well, as you're going to want to chin down the large clusters of mobs. If you're wondering about if this gear is possible to use here, I actually have a video about average gear versus PvM, where I use a similar setup with subjugation armor and a chaotic staff versus Elite Dungeon 2. So things to note in this inventory setup is that I'm using a power burst of vitality and a power burst of acceleration. The power burst of vitality will be used to reduce damage occasionally or to counter mechanics. The power burst of acceleration can be used to speed up running around the dungeon in certain areas. As for the overload, if you don't have searing overloads, which you're going to need to protect yourself against the dragonfire, you need to use different stat boosting potions like extremes and a regular super anti-fire in your inventory. If you've never been there before, you can teleport there using the group system by simply creating a group, adjusting it to the Dragonkin Laboratory, finishing the group, readying up, and teleporting there. As soon as you get 1 kill count, you'll be able to attune your PvM up portal to the Blackstone Dragon, which means you'll no longer need to walk here or use the group system. Alternatively, if you use a Ring of Daemonheim, you can teleport there by walking to the Shadow Reef chest, right-clicking it, and choosing teleport to go to the Dragonkin Lab. This will, however, require the Impressing the Locals mini-quest. If for whatever reason you don't have 1 kill count yet and they fix the group system teleport in the future where you can't do it by yourself anymore, I'm just trying to future-proof this guide, then simply walk there through the wilderness, which will be risky, and buy some teleport tokens from the reward shop in case you need to go back and get that kill count. On screen now is the map overview of Elite Dungeon 2. I'll be going through this dungeon section by section. Now the elite dungeon chest you can see will collect every single drop you obtain as long as it's set to automatic looting. But if you don't have the chest upgrade, which will cost you 750,000 dungeoneering tokens, you'll want to toggle the chest to manual looting, as you have that 20% chance of receiving double loot. After having killed the boss, toggle it back to automatic looting to collect all the trash mob loot. In the first section, you'll notice a bunch of slimes. You're going to need to kill 4 of these slimes, the light colored ones, to open up the barrier. While you attack them, they will multiply, so focus on the lightly colored ones, and once you kill them, move on. Now these can hit fairly hard, so if you want to finish them off so they don't follow you, you can do so, and if you're struggling to take them down, protect from melee and use the devotion ability to reduce incoming damage. Next up, you're going to kill 3 red dragons, one of which is located on the stairs. Try to avoid the door frame to the east as best as possible, otherwise you'll aggro a bunch of spiders which will deal rapid range damage. If you aren't a high level player where you can just ignore them and move on to the next section until you get to the boss, you may want to finish these off. After that, the barrier will open and you'll have to kill 4 red dragons. This may be a good place to use Sunshine, Death Swiftness, or Berserk. After killing the 4 red dragons, you're going to need to kill 4 of these golems. I recommend standing near the middle and using your AoE abilities or chinchompas if you're using ranged. After opening up the barrier, you're going to need to kill a celestial dragon and either 2 slimes or 2 animated books. In this room, you want to keep a good eye on your health, as you can get clapped out quite easily. When killing any and all celestial dragons inside this dungeon, keep an eye on this message you can get on your screen, as when it does show you this message, you need to stun the celestial dragon as quickly as possible, as it's going to heal back up its health. After killing that celestial dragon and 2 mobs, you will open up the barrier, and now you have to kill 3 celestial dragons. After killing those 3 celestial dragons, the barrier will open and you want to focus on this first celestial dragon only, as after you've killed it, the barrier will open up. Finally, to get access to the first boss, you're going to need to kill the celestial dragon that is closest to you or closest towards the small barrier. After you've done this, the barrier to the boss will open, and if you're getting attacked by any other mob, maybe some slimes you've dragged around, you can teleport out, come back in, and those mobs will have disappeared. It's worth noting it will not make the celestial dragon that is standing close to you disappear. The first elite dungeon boss isn't that difficult per se, but it's quite easy to get KO'd if you're not paying attention. This boss requires your full attention. Astellarn has 250,000 life points and is not immune to poison. The boss only has 3 main mechanics, being pulsars, the wormhole plus neutron star mechanic, and celestial rain. Due to the nature of Astellarn's mechanics, you want to align yourself with these red lines, as if you don't, you won't be able to benefit from the wormhole damage buff if the celestial rain mechanic starts in a certain quarter of the arena where you've placed that wormhole. Align yourself with the red lines as seen, and then start the fight by attacking Astellarn and putting on Protect from Magic. Not too long after the fight starts, you'll encounter the Pulsar mechanic. This is a big orb that will deal damage to you every now and then. It has 20,000 health and you just want to kill it as fast as possible and then get back on Astellarn. It's worth pointing out you do not want to use your ultimate ability at the start of the fight. Instead, you want to save it for the wormhole mechanic. This mechanic is indicated if you see this message on screen. Astellarn has chosen you as a wormhole anchor point. In case you're doing this in a group, only one of the 2 or 3 players will get this message. If you are a melee player or you have someone with melee combat in your group, place it in melee distance of Astellarn. As soon as that blue bar you see goes to 0, it will place a 7x7 thing or area called the wormhole that will deal damage to you. Not long after, Astellarn will spawn a neutron star which looks just like a pulsar basically, but this time don't attack it, keep away from it because it will explode for massive damage if it hits you. Instead, lure the neutron star towards the wormhole, and once you do it correctly, it will turn white and give you increased damage against Astellarn once standing in it. At this point, you want to use your ultimate ability, so Berserk, Sunshine, Death Swiftness, and so on, to take Astellarn down quickly. Now, the reason you want to place the wormhole in these red lines is because if you get the Celestial Rain mechanic, which will go on randomly throughout the fight to basically do a bunch of damage to you over time, you will have to move out of the way to avoid that damage. Notice how in this clip, once I sidestep twice, I'm completely free from the Celestial Rain mechanic, and I don't take damage, and I'm still able to stand in the wormhole. Now you know why. Once you've killed Astellarn, the barrier will open and you will be able to go to section 2. In this section, you'll notice 3 celestial dragons, but you only need to kill 2 of them to open up the barrier. After opening up the barrier, move towards the lava strike worms you can see, as you only need to kill 2 of them to open up the next barrier. This section is a little bit annoying as you're going to be aggroing these lava spiders, and if you're taking too much damage, be sure to use the devotion ability and pray range. It's worth pointing out that you can chin the lava strike worms as seen on the video, just like many other mobs in the dungeon. Now, after killing the lava strike worms, you can ignore everything around you and move up towards the black dragons. This is one of the few spots inside the dungeon where you can use a power burst of acceleration to surge and bladed dive up there very quickly. Now, the next section basically consists of you killing every single black dragon and making your way up. Always be going up. If you're using mechanized chinchompas with range, you're able to chin pretty much all of these dragons by attacking the one that is furthest away from you, basically behind other dragons, or at least that's how I usually do it. You could potentially force walk the dragons if they aren't positioned properly, but really at that point I just don't bother, I just kill them. After opening up the barrier, go up and kill 4 lava strike worms. After killing the 4 lava strike worms, you'll open up a barrier and you have to clear all black dragons to finally unlock the second boss, being Verak lith. If you see a larger black dragon, it's just another elite dungeon mini boss which you can kill for 5,000 dungeoneering tokens. Verak lith is the second elite dungeon 2 boss with a large health pool of 600,000, and just like Astellarn is not immune to poison, so be sure to bring that weapon poison along. Unlike Astellarn, Verak lith can attack with 2 different combat styles depending on if you're close enough to him or not. If you're close to him, he can use melee attacks, and if you're far away, he will use magic attacks. He has 4 main mechanics which he will use every 4 auto attacks, starting with the Magma Spire attack. The Magma Spire attack is indicated just before it hits you with a message stating that the earth is shaking below your feet. To counter the small melee hit from this mechanic, simply swap your prayer to melee once and then straight back to magic after the hit, while simultaneously attacking the spire as it stops you from dealing damage to the boss. Using a single threshold in the bleed is usually a good way of taking it down quickly. If for whatever reason you're struggling with the amount of food you have with you, you can also equip your shield and use the resonance ability to get a heal from this mechanic instead. It's worth pointing out that if you're doing this boss in a group, you're going to have more spires for the amount of players in the arena. The second mechanic is what I like to call the opposite egg match, and is indicated with green glowing arrows and a chat pop-up what element you should not be picking. In the example on screen, you can see that it indicates a shock ricochet or shock element. You can see a sort of shock trail animation in the air to indicate what element it is. What you want to do during this mechanic is move towards the spot with the arrows to collect the trail, and then move to either one of the 2 other egg elements in the arena. There are poison, ice, and shock eggs. An easy way to not get confused and not really need to pay any attention to this is just by looking at the color of the trail. If it's blue, go to the green egg. If it's green, go to any of the 2 blue colored eggs. Boom, done. If doing either part of this mechanic incorrectly by either missing the trail or not delivering the energy to the correct egg, both will deal significant damage to you, but especially the second one. If you catch yourself messing this up, quickly click your Power Burst of Vitality in your inventory to reduce damage by 50% as it doubles your health. You can also use Debilitate to reduce the incoming damage from those explosions, and if you have Disruption Shield, you can remove this mechanic entirely by Disruption Shielding just before the trail hits the ground. The third mechanic is also indicated by a chat box pop-up about a black dragon about to dive bomb you, and you also see a red circle and some arrows on the floor. In this case, just move out of the way for a few seconds or just in time with escape or something, and the mechanic will never hit you as it hits in a straight line. The line isn't something that sticks around like Vindicta's Fire, so you can walk back to your Sunshine and Death Swiftness afterwards if you placed it and the dragon dropped his fire trail on there. The fourth and final mechanic can KO you really easily if you don't pay attention, but it's also super easy to react to. It's called the Flame Tornado, and it's indicated by Verak lith saying the flames will consume you, but really all you need to do is run to the opposite side of where you were standing when you see this. If you don't, going to Death's office is almost guaranteed. Verak lith's mechanics are very reactable and are therefore not that difficult. The real difficulty here is if you aren't using high level gear, the fight is fairly long and you'll be using a lot of food. I still wouldn't say that Verak lith is a very difficult boss, but if you're doing this for the first time, you might be surprised at how long a fight will take you. Since its auto attacks are quite high, if you're using ranged or magic, stay out of melee distance and keep protect from magic on. After finishing off Verak lith, instead of walking, go to the chest nearby and select teleport. Then tap the number 4 on your keyboard to go to the next section quickly. You're going to need to walk west from the point you arrive, but you don't actually have to kill the first 2 onyx dragons you encounter. You can simply ignore these and use mobility abilities like Surge and Bladed Dive to get to the 4 dragons next to the barrier a little further west a little more easily. You're also able to use a power boost of acceleration to save some time getting there. Once arrived, take down the 3 Dragonstone dragons and the single onyx dragon standing near the barrier to open it up. It's worth pointing out that when you see spikes moving towards you from any gemstone dragon, they are sending a special attack your way, which will deal damage and have a certain effect depending on the type of gemstone dragon. The Dragonstone dragon will reduce the amount of dragonfire on your dragonfire timers, including the ones from your overload. The Onyx Dragon will steal some of your life, and the Hydrix Dragon will drain your adrenaline to 0. The only time these dragons won't use their special attack is if you're standing in melee distance. After opening up the barrier, kill the 2 Dragonstone dragons next to the stairs to open up the next barrier. You'll now have to head south, and you have a choice of either killing 1 Hydrix Dragon or 2 Dragonstone dragons near the next barrier to open it up. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out that 1 Hydrix Dragon is less health to open up the barrier, so kill the Hydrix Dragon if you want to have a fast run. Finally, kill the 2 Dragonstone dragons near the final boss's entrance to open up the last barrier and to unlock the boss. If you want to remove any mobs that are still following you, simply teleport and then come back in. The Blackstone Dragon is the 3rd and final Elite Dungeon 2 boss with a large health pool of 650,000, and like the other 2 bosses, is not immune to poison, so be sure to bring your weapon poison along as well. This is by far the longest boss fight in the dungeon, especially because you need to take down 4 black hands with 80,000 life each, on top of the 650,000 life points. Let's cover the mechanics step by step. The Blackstone Dragon is a boss that will attack you with all 3 combat styles, but I do like to use Protect from Magic for the majority of the fight. If you see any ranged hits, be sure to protect from range to Prey Afflict to save on food, although I don't do this perfectly myself. In fact, usually I just eat through it. After 3 auto attacks in the first phase, the Blackstone Dragon will use his Spike special attack. If this hits you, it will drain your adrenaline and deal significant damage. It will also reduce the amount of adrenaline you can gain for about 15 seconds. Phase 1 will continue until you reach Phase 2 at 520,000 life points, where the Blackstone Dragon will go into the middle of the arena and spawn 4 black hands. Each of these hands has 80,000 health and is able to spawn little smaller white colored hands which will attack and follow you around. Thankfully though, there are 4 safe spots as you can see on screen now. While standing here just above the crystal shaped thing, on that specific tile you're completely safe from the hands. Because these hands are quite annoying to deal with and this boss is quite tricky with melee in general, I don't suggest using melee here at all and instead use ranged or magic. Now during the black hands phase, you'll notice these black orbs flying towards you and these will deal major magic damage. If you want to reduce the damage, you can use devotion and protect from magic to reduce it to 1 for a period of time. In between these attacks, you are able to soul split on the hands though if you want to heal up a bit. After finishing off the hands, you'll go into phase 3, which has the following attack rotation. What's new in this phase is the Dragonfire mechanic, where the Blackstone Dragon will circle around you with this blue colored fire. The pattern of this fire seems quite predictable, but sometimes, or just occasionally, it will spawn underneath you after having gone through the Blackstone Dragon and getting as small as possible. Not sure why this happens, but it's a bit weird sometimes. If you end up in the fire somewhere throughout the fight, the best tip I have for you is to spam press your surge keybind to get out of the fire as fast as possible, otherwise you'll get deleted to Death's Office. One mechanic worth paying attention to is the Shadow Anima Bomb, where the Blackstone Dragon will yell "Get out of me," or the shadow overwhelms and randomly target an area in the arena. This bomb will do 4,000 damage, so be sure to just move out of the way if you see it going your way. At 260,000 life points, the Blackstone Dragon will start flying around and spawning fire for about a solid minute, and is also invulnerable during this part of the fight. Although you can gain adrenaline by running around and using abilities, and you can even pre-vuln the boss if required. After around a minute of flying up and down, the boss will say "show me the light" and be damageable once again. At this point it's basically all the same mechanics and you just need to finish off the Blackstone Dragon. With that being said, we've come to the end of this Elite Dungeon 2 guide. I hope it was helpful, and if it was, be sure to like and perhaps subscribe for more RuneScape content.